and took us away.
I didn't feel that there was anybody that I could tell, and I was afraid to say anything in case it created more punishment.
Over 2 decades ago, Ireland began to grapple with the legacy of what it had done to children in its care.
The government wishes to make a sincere apology to the victims of childhood abuse.
But it would be a journey fraught with problems.
We tried to say this is an inquiry, not a confrontation.
They didn't believe a word I bloody well said in there.
I felt that I was the perpetrator of the abuse.
Redress paid compensation, but survivors were silenced.
You can't say what you got. You're not allowed to. We'll take you to court if you open your mouth.
They called it dirty money. That's to shut us all up.
Now that the reports have been written and the money is gone, did we go any way towards righting the wrongs of the past?
Justice is not writing a check. Justice is making sure people are helped to rebuild their lives. Money doesn't rebuild your life. First time I was very badly sexually abused was on the day that I made my first communion. You know, then I was sadistically abused. I told the nurse because I was in a fairly bad state after it. The nurse went back and told the brother. She put iodine on the wound. She went back and told the brother. And then the brother beat me and beat me.
I don't think people really understand what children had to go through to survive in such a severe, brutal place, you know. I don't think they've any idea.
We had to build these kids on the back, you know. But if we didn't do it, we'd have got it ourselves.
This nagging physically dragged off me, and I'm left trunking.
It's 7:30, and this is Morning Ireland with Richard Crowley and David Hanley. Last night, RTE1 transmitted the first in a series of 3 documentaries under the title States of Fear.
What happened to them, and the people who took part in the programme, the men and women, deserve great credit in reliving the torture that they suffered.
I realised, oh my God, somebody's actually listening. Maybe now we'll actually get some kind of support, we'll be listened to.
Programme last night, Mayor says the nuns and clergy are selling off a lot of land. This should be frozen until the people are looked after.
It's the biggest lift that survivors of abuse ever got, because somebody was believing them.
We had 5 counsellors in the centre taking calls.
For thousands of people, when they saw it, they equated to it. They knew, that's me. That's, you know, that's him.
Between 1930 and 1970, 42,000 children were detained in Ireland's more than 70 industrial and reformatory schools, mainly due to poverty. Most of these children were committed to the institutions through the courts. Although funded by the state, they were run by religious orders.
Massive fond memories of home. Mostly my mother and my brother and sisters. My mother died. She went to hospital with pneumonia, and she developed double pneumonia, and that time there was hardly no cure for that. And just because she died, 8 of us had to be incarcerated in hellholes. I was just 8 years of age. I was in 1942. They came in and dragged us out of our home and took us away. We never seen a solicitor or a judge, we never seen anyone. And we were sentenced to institutions. I ended up in a place called Ferry House.
For these are the boys of St. Joseph's Industrial School, Ferry House, Clonmel.
And that was the beginning of the worst 8 years of my life.
They are orphaned, illegitimate, destitute or deprived.
Imagine arriving in a place and to be abused by the brothers on the first night that you arrive.
The schools represent security for many boys.
To be sexually abused, nothing worse can happen to you. And to tell people that is worse again.
My mother wasn't married, so she was sent to St. Pat's in Avon Road. Sad to say her mum had kicked her out. When she had me, I'd said to the nuns, I don't want her adopted. So that's why I ended up in an institution. The beatings, the brutality, and if you weren't being brutalised, you were observing other girls being brutalised. I even find, even to today, that if anyone's aggressive, I just walk away. You know, don't argue with them, I just walk away. I hate aggression. You know, it's left me with this, that at times, you know, I feel like I don't even stand up for myself. It's because all those memories come back to me, you know, about a beating with a hurling stick. I used to see some of them wet themselves. But always the question was, why are we getting beaten? You're being punished for your mother's sins. Being punished for your mother's sins.
States of Fear exposed the widespread abuse of children in institutions. But it also showed that the state had detailed knowledge in its own Department of Education files of cruelty, neglect and abuse in the schools, and did nothing about it. Before the last programme in the series was broadcast, the government was forced to act.
On behalf of the state and all the citizens of the state, the government wishes to make a sincere and long overdue apology to the victims of childhood abuse for our collective failure to intervene, to detect their pain and to come to the rescue.
I took the view it was the state's responsibility. I know it's argued about culpability with the religious orders, but this was something the state had done.
The Taoiseach has tonight issued an apology on behalf of the state.
I was really delighted when Bertie Ahern made an apology to us. I felt it was the first time that it was really acknowledged and the state were taking responsibility by apologising.
Abuse had ruined their childhoods.
I was very pleased to hear it. We never ever thought we'd get an apology, you know, from the Irish government.
The Taoiseach strongly worded apology.
Anytime there is an apology coming from the government, it's very significant because the people get the impression that the government is taking responsibility for this and is going to do something about it.
At the time, the government was worried about thousands of potential High Court cases relating to abuse at industrial schools. A confidential government report had warned that the state could be liable for its failures to protect children from abuse.
They were terrified of these people taking actions through the court system, and it would completely clog up our court system, so they couldn't risk that either. So there's a very pragmatic reason for the state to go down this route as well.
Mr Ahern said, in the interests of justice and the common good, a commission of inquiry into childhood abuse was being established.
We would set up a commission to examine religious institutions in detail, because I couldn't arbitrate what I was hearing was totally right, partially right, total nonsense, though I clearly believed a lot of it.
High Court Judge Mary Lafoy was appointed to chair the new commission to inquire into child abuse.
My hope was that we would hear the survivors, that they would get some closure from it. We would report fairly on what had actually occurred and would make whatever recommendations we considered necessary to ensure it didn't happen again.
In its findings, the committee will name individuals or institutions proven to have caused abuse.
Almost as soon as the commission began its work, there was an obstacle.
Lawyers for victims were saying, we're not happy to get our clients to participate in an inquiry without having in place a scheme of compensation. The government decided we'll set up a quite separate scheme standing apart from the Child Abuse Commission to compensate survivors of abuse. So, redress, specifically redress in the form of money.
Unlike the Commission, the Redress Board would not investigate abuse or make findings. Its job was to determine how much compensation was to be paid to survivors. The two schemes would run in parallel, but were completely separate. Once the issue of compensation was resolved, the Commission began hearing evidence.
Once the work of the Commission got underway, these survivors got their opportunity to talk to the Commission and to talk to one of the two strands. Either the investigation committee, where they were frequently interrogated, or indeed the confidential committee, where they could tell their whole story in confidence.
The confidential committee, that worked well from the start. The problem was with the investigation committee, which was an investigation into who was responsible for the abuse, and that was going to lead to findings which might identify perpetrators.
In order to make findings and to name abusers, the Commission would need full cooperation from the very institutions it was investigating, the Department of Education and the religious orders.
At that stage, most of the congregations, they were not cooperating with the Commission. It was being fought like a legal battle. That is the reality of it.
The legal battle was costing the state time and money. And there was another problem. The Department of Education was slow to release its files.
The records they had, they were crucial to the investigation. It is true that it was a difficult task for the department, but I think there was more to it than that. I think there was a resistance.
In spite of these obstacles, the Commission began hearing evidence from its first witnesses, survivors of the Baltimore Fishery School in Cork.
It had closed in 1950. Obviously, the survivors were ageing, and we felt it was important to deal with them.
Maybe they chopped this down.
I originally was born in Capel Street, Dublin, to a girl of 16 years of age. I was fostered out to my foster mother to be brought up in Kiltuna. At the age of 10, I had to appear in Dundrum Court, brought by my foster mother.
Andy's care was paid for by a Catholic agency. But when foster children reached a certain age, they were often sent to industrial schools through the courts, even though they committed no crime.
I was sentenced in my presence at the court and sent to Baltimore Fishery School.
In the late 1930s, the Bishop of Ross in Cork put pressure on the Department of Education to send more boys to the school. In Dublin, Andy's foster mother was receiving just over 7 shillings a week for his care from the Catholic Protection and Rescue Society. Baltimore got 19 shillings a week from the state for boys like Andy. Though it didn't make financial sense, Andy was removed from a happy home in Dublin and sent to the fishery school in Baltimore.
I was sent down there for the simple reason, for the money for the Catholic Church.
Every child placed in an industrial school got a capitation fee attached to that committal. The capitation system is partly responsible for maintaining high numbers of children in the schools. Simply, the less children you had, the less income you had to run an institution.
I arrived in Baltimore somewhere around about 10:30 at night. Next morning, wake up about 6:30, go down to the washroom. I'm looking for a towel, soap. Doesn't happen. With nothing, just water. And the water we used to do the cooking and that, it was in 2 big concrete vats. You could see the maggots floating on the top. White maggots floating on the top. I remember the time I was that hungry, I ate what come down the waste pipe to go into the drain from the washing up. There's not many people can say that, but I have done that. Up there was the fishery school. There was a big wall all the way along, and I used to nip over the wall to get down to here. And the station master used to eat his sandwiches at a certain time, and I'd have the bits that's left off. I used to argue a lot, and I'd end up getting a flogging. In one particular occasion, the priest gave me a flogging across the shoulders, head, wherever. And when he was finished, I said to him, I suppose you'll go and say Mass in the morning now. So that's how holy and wholesome he was. And he was a parish priest in charge of kids.
Records from the 1940s show the Department of Education knew about the conditions in Baltimore. An inspector noted it was the worst of all the schools, and she would sympathise with a child placed in it. Despite reports like this year after year, the department continued to send boys like Andy there. The Baltimore boys were elderly men by the time the Commission acknowledged what they had suffered.
The institution that we did make findings in relation to was Baltimore. It's quite clear that they did know what was happening in Baltimore.
These were the last findings Judge Lafoy would make. 3 years after the Commission began its work, her intention to name perpetrators was being legally challenged by the Christian Brothers. Her battles with the Department of Education continued, and funding was being withheld.
I remember at that stage saying to my colleagues, I think they want us to wilt on the vine. And I was conscious of, if it was going nowhere, the effect it was going to have on the survivors. Expense to the public. We had spent €10 million at that stage.
If Justice Mary Lafoy has announced her decision to resign as chairperson...
Justice Lafoy's decision to resign was conveyed to the government in the next...
I resigned in December 2003 after 3.5 years.
The decision was revealed in a statement on the Commission's website.
The main objective, to shake them into doing something, because it was going on and on and on.
I never quite understood what we were doing to make life difficult for her. So I don't think the government I was part of ever resisted her work, and my view is she shouldn't have resigned. She walked out at a sensitive period, and she would have been better to stay and finish the job.
A spokesperson for the Education Department declined to say if it had been expected.